Welcome to Neural News Hub. We're kicking things off today with some huge geopolitical shifts, where nations are redrawing their strategic maps right before our eyes. First up, we're heading to the South Caucasus for what is really a historic turn. Armenia, a country that's been in Russia's orbit for a very long time, is making a sharp and decisive pivot toward the West. And look, this isn't just empty words. Armenia is making some serious moves. They've signed a strategic partnership charter with the US, they've hit pause on their membership in the Russian-led security alliance, and their parliament is even pushing for a future in the EU. This is a huge deal. It's a formal, tangible shift that really puts a dent in Russia's long-held influence in a supercritical region. All right, let's jump over to the Middle East, where another high-stakes diplomatic chess game is playing out. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was on his way to Washington, and he has one very clear mission: to get right in the middle of the nuclear talks with Iran. So Netanyahu's timing here is no accident. He's showing up to have the biggest possible impact on those talks between Washington and Tehran, aiming to lay out what he calls Israel's vision. The big sticking point is still uranium enrichment, and Israel is jumping in at this crucial moment to try and shape U.S. policy, hoping to block any deal that it views as a threat to its very survival. It's a really bold diplomatic gambit. Okay, from those global tensions, we're now turning to some major political shockwaves heading closer to home for a couple of world leaders. We're talking about crises that are seriously threatening their grip on power. Over in the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government is, frankly, in chaos. We're talking about a series of bombshell resignations that have just rocked Downing Street and put his entire leadership on the line. And man, this all happened so fast. It was like a domino effect. First, the chief of staff resigns. Then, not even 24 hours later, the director of communications is gone too. The whole thing snowballed until a senior leader in his own party publicly called for Starmer himself to step down. And the spark that lit this whole fire? Starmer's controversial appointment of Peter Mandelson, whose past connections to the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein blew up in his face. In this quote from Anis Sarwar, a top figure in Scottish Labour, really hits the nail on the head. He calls the leadership a huge distraction and points out they broke their promise to be different. What's so brutal about this is that it's coming from inside his own party. It's not the opposition, it's one of his own, saying his leadership has become a liability. From that political firestorm in the UK, we're now turning to a major legal reckoning in Hong Kong. The landmark national security case against pro-democracy media tycoon Jimmy Lai has come to a stunning end, and it's put the city's leadership and its legal system under a global microscope. 20 years. Just let that sink in for a second. That's the prison sentence handed down to Jimmy Lai. And this verdict, it's a huge symbol of just how much the legal and political ground has shifted in Hong Kong under Beijing's new national security law. And the trial itself was, well, pretty telling. Lai was found guilty of conspiracy to publish seditious materials and collusion. But here's the kicker: the trial was held without a jury. For a lot of people watching around the world, this verdict is basically seen as the final nail in the coffin for press freedom in Hong Kong, and a chilling warning to anyone else who might dare to speak out. Okay, let's shift gears now and talk about the economic powerhouses of Asia, where some recent election results and big meetings are really setting the stage for what comes next. And we're starting in Japan, because, wow, Prime Minister Takaichi's Liberal Democratic Party just scored a massive, massive win in the general election. And this is a total game changer for the country's economy. I mean, they didn't just win. The LDP and their coalition partner, Ishin, locked down a 2/3 supermajority. And that's a huge deal because it gives the government pretty much free rein to pass whatever laws they want, no questions asked. So what does this all mean for Japan? Well, it's a giant green light for Prime Minister Takaichi's big spending economic plans. We're probably going to see things that boost the stock market, but also put more pressure on the yen. It really puts the Bank of Japan in a tough spot, trying to balance inflation and growth. Bottom line, this landslide lets the government go full throttle on economic stimulus, and you can bet that's going to send ripples all across Asian markets. So while Japan's focused on its domestic economy, its neighbor China is looking outward, getting everything ready for the huge APEC summit it's hosting in 2026. So the theme they're going with is building an Asia-Pacific community to prosper together. Sounds nice, right? The focus is on openness, innovation, and cooperation. But the real prize here, pushing forward a massive free trade area for the whole Asia-Pacific. China hasn't hosted this in over a decade, so you know they're using this as a major platform to project their economic power and push their own vision for the region's future. All right, for our last segment, we're going to look at a mix of stories, from escalating conflicts and military strikes to how sports and politics can collide in some pretty surprising ways. Tensions are flaring up again in the Middle East, with the United Nations coming out and strongly condemning some new Israeli measures in the occupied West Bank. Yeah, the UN Secretary-General, Guterres, said he has grave concern over new rules that make it easier for settlers to buy land. And this has set off a firestorm of criticism. The EU, for example, is calling it de facto annexation. The big picture here is that the international community sees this as another major blow to any hope for a two-state solution. Okay, from diplomatic clashes to direct military action, the U.S. has just carried out another deadly strike, this time on a boat in the Eastern Pacific. U.S. Southern Command confirmed what they call a lethal kinetic strike. Basically, they blew up a boat, killing 2 alleged narco-terrorists. Now, this isn't a one-off thing. It's the latest of dozens of similar attacks. And these strikes are kicking up a lot of dust, legally speaking, raising some serious questions about these kinds of killings in international waters, all in the name of fighting drug trafficking. And now for something a little different. A story about how a major geopolitical showdown was avoided, and not at some fancy summit, but on a cricket field. After days of everyone holding their breath, the government of Pakistan has given the green light. Their team will play India in the T20 Cricket World Cup. This is a complete reversal of a threatened boycott that started over issues with Bangladesh. It just goes to show you how powerful sports diplomacy can be, especially when it comes to the incredibly tense relationship between nuclear-armed neighbors like India and Pakistan. And we're going to end today on a positive note, shifting from conflict to cooperation. It's World Pulses Day, a global effort to shine a light on sustainable nutrition. So this year is all about the super important role that pulses, things like lentils and beans, play in sustainable farming. And right at the heart of it all is India. I mean, they are the world's biggest producer, the biggest consumer, and the biggest importer of these vital crops. Pretty amazing. Please hit the like and subscribe button for more such updates and informative videos.